Back from our walking meditation. And so we're about to go into our last meditation session for the day. Be about 45 minutes. And so got some really good advice from a monk when I was on, from the first meditation teacher that I had. Used to go on these retreats, and he was Zen. He was formerly lived in Korea in the Zen tradition, and they have these kind of 3-month retreats. So here we did. Kind of like 5 hour half day. There they have 3 months. And it starts at like 3 a.m. and ends at 10 p.m. And in the middle of the retreat, they have this period called Youngmin Jungjin, which means fearless practice. And then that's 7 days where they practice the whole 7 days and you're not allowed to fall asleep. And if you fall asleep, somebody comes and hits you with a wake-up stick is what they called it in English. I don't know the Korean name. But this retreat would go on. You can imagine kind of the monks would be in some kind of physical pain, towards the end of the retreat. And finally it came down to the last day, and kind of very last sitting. And what his advice was, he said, you could always see the monks who would be kind of making progress, I guess you could say, have the right attitude towards making progress in their practice. Because he said right up to the very last minute that the bell rang, up to the very last second, these monks would be kind of sweeping, if there was work to do, they'd be sweeping. Right up to the very last meditation session, they'd be putting forth effort in their practice. And then he said you might see other monks who the last meditation session, they're kind of like checking the clock, what time is it? 1 more second to go. Can I? And of course, there's a lot to learn in this, right? Kind of a lot to learn about anticipation, about the way our mind kind of launches out to possibilities in the future. It doesn't want to take advantage of the opportunities that are there in the present. So what this requires a bit of it, or what this can help us generate last sitting, is to generate some kind of effort, kind of this attitude, okay. This is where kind of the very last sitting is where kind of sometimes these defilements come up, like, somehow the pain didn't seem so bad before, and then last 5 minutes, it's just, it comes up a lot. Or it might be a totally blissful sitting, I don't know. But this monk's advice to me, actually, or not just to me, to everybody at the retreat, actually kind of stuck with me from that retreat onwards. And I think is, really good advice anyway. Because the very last thing, there's this kind of tendency or this, there can be this temptation to take it easy. But if fighting that temptation, right up to the very last minute of the retreat, right up to the very last second, kind of going for it, what that actually does is it creates a leaning or a momentum. Even after we leave the retreat kind of stays with us. We kind of don't actually kind of leave it, kind of the momentum carries on. And the opposite can also be true if we kind of, not to put pressure on anybody or anything like that, but if we kind of got up and left or whatever, last sitting, then opposite can be true. That creates a momentum of its own. So his kind of explanation was that this is a kind of opportunity, kind of an opportunity right up to the very last second to practice, up to the very last second to meditate, and up to the very last second to develop wholesome qualities. So I just thought I'd kind of share that with you guys. Nothing too torturous. Of course, if anybody needs to shift to a chair or anything, no worries. Not really that strict or sticklerish. But just a little story for our last session here. So that concludes our sitting portion. So if anybody needs to stretch their legs or hands, please feel free. And we'll have a little Dhamma talk. Okay, so do a reflection on the Dhamma. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. So, nice to see everybody, and we've now reached the final hour, final half hour or so of our retreat. And it's kind of interesting. I remember being on retreats for people with the first time, and although you're not saying anything to anybody, really, there's kind of a sense of goodwill for your fellow retreatants. Develops kind of a sense of friendliness and, they call samagi or harmony towards people that we've been sitting with for a while. And this is kind of what it can be like in monastic life too at times. Even though you don't really say kind of anything to anybody, there's something kind of nice about being together with other people for the sake of cultivating wholesome intentions and for the sake of cultivating something good. That's kind of something pre-verbal, It's kind of sitting here, spreading thoughts of goodwill, watching our breath, and nothing in particular that's too hard to explain about doing either of those techniques. And yet there's kind of something profound about it, Something that's very nice about this. All the greatest kind of sages in human history, the great sages, the Buddha, many of the great rishis in the Hindu tradition, they all kind of came together. They all practiced meditation, kind of watching their breath, bringing their mind back to a single object, kind of yoking their mind. And the amazing thing about this is that I remember one of the amazing things. I remember being on my first retreat, and during the retreat, so kind of tired, and somehow, when you stop the retreat, you have all this extra energy. It's kind of like, not to say that will necessarily happen with everybody, but it can be like, where did that come from, Can also be the case, during the retreat, these different things come up, things that might annoy, things that, memories of the past and future, and it can seem like, can seem very nice to do, but can also at times seem difficult. And then when the retreat ends, it's kind of like, well, where did all those things go? This kind of feeling of happiness can arise as we leave the retreat, as we kind of go out into our daily activities. And just watching these feelings, noticing them, noticing how these things arise, we can learn a lot about what it's really like to abandon kind of defilements, kind of abandoning these unwholesome qualities in our mind when we're in the process of doing that. It doesn't seem like that much fun, kind of quitting smoking. Sometimes doesn't seem like all that much fun. But then the day comes, we mentioned earlier, when we notice, wow, our body is stronger now. Kind of able to walk a lot faster, run a lot further, And similarly, kind of leaving a meditation retreat, just sitting here together, watching our breath, spreading thoughts of goodwill, we leave, sometimes can have this kind of extra energy. Kind of a bit of extra energy, a bit of extra happiness, And another way to look at this is kind of like somebody who goes to work, Kind of, actually, this has been a 9 to 5, so it's been a bit of a kind of work day here. And after we go to work, sometimes you get pay. You get kind of some money, right? And there's a choice. You have this money, kind of a choice. How do we spend it, right? So I remember, being kind of young, getting the first job or whatever. There's a choice. You get that money. It's like, okay, party time. Go party and then spend all the money, and then next paycheck you have to do it all again. And it can be a similar thing with the happiness that arises from meditation, with the kind of extra energy that arises from meditation. It's kind of like collecting our pay, you know? Kind of like, okay, now we've got this kind of money, we've got this kind of extra happiness, you know? And there's all kinds of things that can be done with that. You know? Actually, I remember when I first started meditating, it was explicitly for the purpose of like performance enhancement, you know? I wasn't really a Buddhist or anything. I just wanted to become happier, you know, wanted to overcome like emotional difficulties, this kind of thing. And, you know, wanted to, you know, do well in school, you know, it's kind of normal things. And so I would meditate with that purpose in mind. Kind of meditate explicitly for the sake of gaining clarity of mind so that I could, you know, have a better conversation on, you know, my date. Or gaining clarity of mind so that I could, you know, study for longer hours. Actually, that was the main reason, that was the main kind of immediate benefit I saw of meditation right away. Kind of start meditating, all of a sudden I can study for a whole lot longer than I could before. I used to be like totally, oh, I can't sit here, I gotta get up. Finally, you can start studying. You know? And this is one way you can spend this kind of joy, this kind of energy that we get from meditation. And this kind of, what we spend this on, what we spend this extra energy, we spend this extra joy on, that's actually, in a way, that's where we learn about this kind of what the Buddha calls vipaka kamma. You know? In other words, we do a good deed, all of a sudden our mind inclines towards wholesome results. What we wish for, what our mind inclines toward, we strive for that, and we can achieve it. Something that becomes more easy to achieve. You know? The thing about this, though, is that just like our wages, once we spent it, it's gone. Right? Kind of, we've got it. I mean, we've got whatever we get from spending that. You know, if we bought a vacuum cleaner, we've got that vacuum cleaner. It's not like it's going anywhere, right? Kind of, you know, buy a new TV set, it's there. You know, that's fine. We can enjoy it. Kind of spend our meditation on, you know, developing more wholesome relationships. Of course, that's good to do. Might, in my case, might have gotten a girlfriend, okay, when I was young. That's great, so now you've got her. But of course, then you lose that. Eventually, those kind of things go away through one way or another, you know? And then you're left back, we can be left back where we were. You have to keep reinvesting, you know? So I remember when I first started meditating as well, you know, kind of used to really love to listen to kind of rap music. I was kind of into this, you know, kind of gangster rap. And we'd go and meditate and would feel fantastic. And then the rest of the week, be listening to gangster rap. And kind of doing whatever it was, you know, studying. And the next week I came to sit down and meditate. It was like I was back at square one, you know? So this is kind of one of the ways that we see about vipaka kamma, what we spend this kind of good kamma on, and the kind of results that spending that has. And we also see where we get stuck in meditation, where we can see what it is that causes us to stagnate. If we're spending our good kamma and, you know, not reinvesting it, then we get back to square one. Same things that cause us to suffer can come up again. But just like we get these kind of wages after working a while, we have the opportunity to spend them on a number of different things. We also have the opportunity to reinvest them, you know, to invest them for the future, you know. And so that's the way that we can have a kind of amount of money that builds, right? Kind of not every paycheck. We need not living paycheck to paycheck, right? Not living one good vipaka kamma to another. No, rather than that, we have this kind of store of, we call it money. Money builds up. And the way that people build up money is they take the wages that they've earned, they invest it. Kind of invest it, something that brings a larger return. Of course, it doesn't mean that, you know, all of their money, 100%, goes to investment. You know, I mean, people have to eat, right? Got to do normal things. You know, people, you know, whatever, go shopping or go to the movies, these kind of things are just normal, right? But a portion of that, you know, portion of that funds, that money, they take it and they put it away in the bank. They kind of buy stocks with it. They put it into something that will bring a greater return in the future. You know? And so in the same way, leaving the meditation retreat, we can have this kind of sense of happiness, a sense of lightness, kind of a sense of a buoyancy, and that's great, it's a good thing. And naturally, do some normal things with it, whatever it is, invested in getting, whatever it is. But then there's also a portion that we can take and reinvest for a greater gain. So there's a portion that we can take from this energy and say, I'm going to take this extra energy, rather than spending it, I'm going to reinvest it in a daily meditation practice. So if we don't have a daily meditation practice going right now, this is a possibility. Again, not going to check anybody's homework or anything like that. It's up to whoever. But we can take this kind of energy and sit for 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening. Kind of not an injunction. But this is a way that we take this kind of momentum from the retreat and we reinvest it into something that will become more wholesome. Another way that we can take this kind of momentum from the retreat and reinvest it is by taking some of this energy and asking ourselves, what is it? What is the bad habit right now that's needing to be undone? What is the kind of defilement in my mind that stands out right now, right? And everybody can kind of ask this question for themselves, right? We all know for ourselves. Actually, I don't know for other people. I know for myself, right, what it is. We all kind of know what that is. Do we tend to fly off the handle for X, Y, and Z reason? Do we tend to have a kind of, addiction to TV, to junk food, whatever it is? We know. What is it that's causing us to suffer over and over again? What is it that's always pulling our mind out, that always seems to be tripping us up? And so then what we can do is take this momentum from the retreat, reinvest a little bit of it in a daily practice, and then we focus in on that bad habit. It's kind of, I remember I had a cousin, he told me this good metaphor. He said, they live in the country, and he said, it's kind of like, you ever heard that saying, if you chase two rabbits at once, they both get away? I was like, well, I kind of hadn't heard that saying before, but it was a good one. Because it's true, if you run after one and the other kind of zigzag, and they both escape, And in the same way, similar way, it's not exact, but we can just choose, one bad habit, What is it, that's causing us to suffer over and over again? And we focus in on that. This is what I'm going to work on reducing, kind of day by day. We kind of know, can even set kind of goals for ourselves regarding that. If there's a particular person that tends to trigger us, we can plan it out. Next time this person says X, Y, and Z, rather than flying off the handle, I'm going to do this instead. We learn to focus on just taking out that one bad habit, reducing that one bad habit. The interesting thing about this is that when we turn our attention to reduce just this one bad habit, it's like a kind of tree with a root system, So these bad habits, what the Buddha calls defilements or kilesas, they don't just exist in isolation. They're like a kind of Illuminati network. They all have kind of support from each other, So when we turn our minds to try to undo this one bad habit, what we find is that we start pulling on it, and it's like pulling on a tree root. We give it a yank, and other roots start to come up with it. Other roots, other things that we're pulling on. So then we have to see, to really pull this out, do I have to kind of chop this little root here? Do I have to chop that one over there? Gradually kind of loosening this kind of root from the soil. Sometimes we might have to kind of dig under it. Sometimes there might be a rock that's over top of it. We have to topple the rock. But in these ways, we begin to see these kind of linkages in our mind. And that might have escaped unnoticed before. Kind of these linkages that cause us to suffer. So, and that's where we really gain kind of insight into the Buddha's teachings. Kind of often these kind of things, these kind of bad habits, it starts off this way, right? Kind of we read a meditation manual, and it says, okay, step A, watch your breath. Step B, relax the portions of your body. Step C, watch your breath continuously for 500 breaths. Step E, the light nimitta will arise. Step F, focus on the light nimitta and you'll be in jhana for 6 hours. Right? These kind of meditation instructions. And those meditation instructions, they're given by experienced teachers, are good. But the thing about the Buddha's teachings is that, say, like in between step B and step E or whatever it is, I can't remember what step we listed, there's a whole lot of other things that go on there. Yeah? So we don't have to worry too much if we're at step C, which is watch your breath, and step D is watch your breath unceasingly for 500 breaths. We don't need to think that our meditation practice is stuck or that we're not making progress. Our meditation practice comes out into our life in just this way. When we learn to reinvest it, when we learn to focus in on our bad habits, and we learn to cut them away bit by bit by bit, kind of root by root by root, whatever it might be, And so the interesting thing about these kind of bad habits, these kind of things that might seem small, start digging it up, start pulling it. It's like there's kind of other little rootlets there, But it's kind of like the Buddha uses this analogy for ignorance. It's kind of like an egg. Kind of says, beings can be shrouded in ignorance, like an egg. In other words, like a chicken is in an egg. It's just totally enveloped by ignorance. All it sees is the shell, the sides of the egg. And in the same way, this is a kind of metaphor. Similarly, we have this kind of perception pattern, or can have this perception pattern in our life. Our world is this way. Our experience of our world is this way. It's always this way. It's always kind of constant. Actually, all of us inhabit really different worlds, or different worlds anyway. We all know that's a chair. But the kind of emotional structures, the way that we perceive the world is different for everybody. It's kind of like being wrapped in an egg. And the thing about these kind of roots, these kind of things that seem small, we go to pull them out, and then we realize we're pulling against a kind of portion, I guess you could say, of our kind of reality. These bad habits, these kind of things that are unwholesome, that make us suffer, they're the very things that encase us, encase our reality. Not like it's encased with a bad habit, but it's encased with this set of perceptions that we live our life by, and they can all kind of interlink in different ways. So what we find just in doing something minor like this, just in starting to erode one bad habit, we learn to become a kind of a connoisseur of eroding bad habits. Learn to become a kind of connoisseur of pulling up roots. We learn to become somebody who can see even the small bits of happiness that arise when they eliminate an unwholesome tendency. And by becoming a kind of connoisseur like this, our mind inclines more and more and more to pulling these things up. And this is kind of progress in our meditation practice. Doesn't mean we have to be jumping into the fourth jhana on our, on our first retreat, right? It's like this kind of slowly eroding our bad habits, slowly pulling them up, one by one. The nice thing about this kind of thing is that the Buddha describes it as something that's good in the middle, good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. In other words, there's no part of this that's bad. No part of this that's unwholesome. No part of this that doesn't have happiness as a result. We pull up our bad habits a little bit, we get a little bit of happiness. We pull up them a lot, we get a lot of happiness. And if we completely eliminate them, we get complete happiness. It all starts from this. It's kind of doing this, just 10 minutes a day. What is my bad habit? How can I eliminate it? And as we gradually change our habits like this, as we gradually change the inclination of our mind, what happens is our perceptions start to change. Perceptions start to shift. Sometimes it can be like, what is this thing that's causing me to suffer? Why is it causing me to suffer this way? I don't get it. Keeps pulling me off. And keep pulling it up bit by bit, bit by bit, bit by bit. And if we don't stop this, if we're sincere in it, if we're unflinching in it, then the day comes when fighting against this and not stopping, it breaks. Kind of stops. And this can be a kind of change in our world, and kind of change in our perception. Maybe a kind of crack of light going through the egg. It can be kind of like a fish who flies out of the water for a bit, sees some land, gets the idea that it's there. But these habits can be like that, kind of encasing. It's like that. So the opportunities that come from our meditation practice, they start out in kind of simple ways like this. It doesn't have to be this kind of world upturning, amazing thing that's happening all the time. The amazing thing is right here in eliminating our bad habits. That's what the Buddhist teaching is about, to cut the roots of all of our unwholesome tendencies. This is the whole point. Point is doing this is because these things are the things that cause us to suffer. It's kind of bad habits, these unwholesome roots. So we learn to chip away by them bit by bit. We learn to become connoisseurs of chipping away at them bit by bit. And when we learn to do this, our mind inclines more and more towards chipping away at them bit by bit. Becomes more and more sensitive to the happiness that comes from that. And when this occurs, this is the times when eventually we actually do get some of the things that we were looking for. Day comes when when some of those things can come to a meditation practitioner. But when they come, the interesting thing about those things is that they're not always the way that they were imagined. Kind of imagined it would be this way. Something comes to a person who's meditating and it's like, oh, it wasn't that way. It was this way. And that's because we have these set of perceptions and bad habits that envelop like an egg. Envelop us. So if we want to see outside of them, then we continue to practice like this. We take this kind of momentum that we had from the retreat, and rather than totally spending it, rather than totally letting it go, we reinvest it to make our practice stronger and more consistent. And when we have this kind of stronger and more consistent practice, then we have an inclination of our mind that will help us through. We have this kind of inclination of our mind eventually, we can come to know and see, some of the things that the Buddha talks about. And this is where we really gain a kind of confidence in the Buddha's teaching. We often have this word faith, but this word faith kind of can mean both this kind of faith that somebody's really good, and also this kind of confidence. This kind of confidence that comes from knowing something directly. It's like the confidence that somebody has in science when they go to turn on their car and it turns on, and they press the gas pedal and it drives. They hop in an airplane and it flies. All of a sudden they start to think, wow, this science is pretty good. Not bad, Kind of go to the movie theater, the thing turns on, computers work. Wow, science is amazing, engineering is amazing, And in the same way, we learn to practice the Buddha's teachings, we learn to put them to the test, we learn to see that what he taught is true, The things that he taught, the things that he said would lead to happiness do lead there. The things that he said lead to unhappiness do lead there. And the possibilities that he talks about in his teachings are there for the people who practice them. And when we come to know this, as we talked about earlier, we gain a bit of an independent knowledge in the Buddha's teachings. We gain a kind of knowledge that's our own. It's a knowledge that comes from meditation practice. It's a knowledge that comes from training our mind. It's a knowledge that comes from pulling up those roots. And it's our knowledge. We can share it with other people in words, but it's there for us, dwelling in our kind of hearts. It's a kind of faith, a kind of conviction that doesn't have to leave. And so those are some of the benefits that can come from just taking a little simple thing like this, a meditation retreat, getting a bit of happiness, and reinvesting it for a bigger gain. A lot of millionaires might have been made that way. So those are a few reflections maybe on how we can become millionaires in the Dhamma. Okay, so I think that's pretty much all for the retreat. And maybe we can, let's see here, we can end with a bit of chanting. And then I'll do maybe a short blessing chant to wish everybody well. And then how about a group photo? And Irfan will have a few announcements too. Okay? So the closing homage is on the back page of this evening chanting. bent.